Hi, I'm Ken, and this is Adventures in 3D Printing. And to give you an idea of how frustrating my day has been 3D printing, I just recorded this video, and apparently I didn't hit the record button hard enough because it didn't record even a single second. And it's all my 3D printer's fault. Okay, so I promised in the last video that I would do a video. The next video would be about the pre-flight of my printer. And this is just not the way I had expected it to. So my brother paid me a visit yesterday, and I told him a couple of days ago that I had bought a 3D printer, and he said, I've got a project for you. Okay, great. So he was over here last night, and I hadn't pre-flighted the printer. I was going to shoot video of the whole thing. As it turns out, I didn't, and it's probably for the best because it really is not that exciting. I followed, in the manual, it has the pre-flight, and there it goes through, and it's pretty standard. And there's a video of Joseph Prusa going through the printer checks. And so I brought it up full screen on my laptop, and as he does something, I do the same thing on my printer. And it goes through the pre-check, which checks all the electronics, and it passes. Great. The one thing I was worried about was the electronics. They passed. Great. Fantastic. It gets to the point where it does the XYZ calibration, and it's trying to find the 4 points, the 4 corners of the bed, and it's working on number 1. I've got the piece of paper between the bed and the hot end, and it can't find that first point. Failed. Okay. Well, why? I look in the manual, and it says, make sure that you assembled the printer correctly. Really? Yeah, I'm fairly certain I did. So, to make a long story somewhat short, after looking in the controller box and checking the plugs, making sure that they are correct, and this calibration test had failed 2 or 3 times, always on that first point. After checking all the electronics in the controller box, I closed it back up and sealed it, screwed it tight, and started the calibration test, the wizard from the beginning. Every point until this point, it had started on its own at the XYZ calibration test, and it had failed every time. So I started at the beginning. It went through, checked the electronics, it checked the fans. It went through, and this time it passed the XYZ test. Went through all of the calibration tests perfectly. Okay, why? That was my question. Why? I didn't do anything. Literally, I did not do anything, and this time it passed. Okay, fine. It'll print. So I decide to, got the SD card. I know it's got a bunch of files on it, so I print from the SD card. I start going through the files, and I come across one that says, all I saw was the word castle. That's all I needed to see because, well, anybody who knows me knows I have a thing for castles. Print. And I start, at the bottom it scrolls and tells you what the name of the file is, and it tells you it's going to take 12 and a half hours. Oh, that's not good. This is at 6 o'clock last night. Okay, well, we'll let it go and see what happens. It didn't get very far. This is it. Two out of 2 or 2.5 layers. Now, one of the things that Joseph Prusa does is he does a delta Z test to change the height of the hot end. They talk about you want the plastic to come out, and that first layer. It's the first layer test is what it is. First layer calibration, and he shows you a nice little picture of 2 round and 2 flat, and this is just right. Well, okay, I apparently I've reached that age where filament like this is just too small for me to really see very well. I will admit, as it's going through and it's doing its test, I can see the filament and it looks really, really flat. I don't know if it's too flat. It's the correct height is a very subjective thing. You know it when if you have the experience, you know it when you see it, and I don't have the experience. But as I'm going through, like I said, I was watching the video, and he says, I'm scrolling it down, so it's negative. The Z is at negative 1 millimeter or thereabout. So I'm scrolling down because it starts at 0 plus 0.000. So I'm spinning the dial, looking at the screen to see where it's at, and I get down close to -1, and my brother says, "Hey, there's something wrong with your printer." And I look up at the build plate, and it's got little globs and nothing in between as it's moving, back and forth. So I knew I had gotten it too low, so I backed it off, and I didn't pay attention to how far. I backed it off to the point where it seemed to be flowing right stably. I guess is the right word. And so I thought, all right, we're at hopefully at a good height, and so I started to print, and this is what came out. I was like, okay, that doesn't work. So this morning, first thing I did when I woke up was to RTFM. If you don't know what that means, Google it. Read the entire manual, which was a good thing. I should have done that before I did anything else. I've been in computers for 40 years. We don't read manuals until something goes wrong and you have to. Anyway, so this morning, after reading the manual, I did a test print. I printed it. I went through SD card, checked files, found one that said Batman, 18 minutes. And so I printed it. And wow, I got a Batarang. I got a really nice Batarang. Shiny. I mean, I could paint this black and leave the edges silver and it would look like Batman's Batarang. It's really nice. Okay, cool. So the reason my brother came over last night was that he had that project he wanted me to do, and I had created, I had designed a file that would do this. And I will be doing a separate video on this later. So I pulled it up and this morning and started printing, and it was doing very well up to a certain point. And then, so this is 2 hours worth of printing. I actually have, let me do this properly. I have 2 of them. I printed them both at the same time. That's 2 hours worth of printing. I had been shooting video of the print process, and with the intention of doing this other video, which I will be doing later. And I had been, gotten the first few layers were down, and they was looking really good. So I left for a half an hour, came back, still looking really good. Left for another half hour, came back, everything's good. An hour and a half into it, checked the third half hour, it's still printing. So I thought, okay, 2 hours. Looked at it, it's still printing. I figure, okay, it's halfway through. It says 3 hours 49 minutes to print this. I thought, okay, we're halfway through. I'll wait an hour and come back and see where it's at. So I come back in an hour, and the extruder is all the way to the right of the carriage, and the screen says crash detected, and it gives me a time. It gives me, oh no, is it crash detected? Do you want to restart? So I said yes. And the extruder moved halfway back to where it needed to get, because these were in the middle of the build plate. It moved a little bit and then started printing in midair, and then came back and hit the right side and crash detected. Okay. I don't know what happened. So I started playing around with it, trying to do more prints. And that kept happening. I would zero it out. I turn it off, move the carriage all the way back to the left, turn it back on, auto home, found the home, and I would start printing, and it would print for a while, and then it would go all the way to the right, and it would crash detected. As far as I could tell, it was basically losing its mind. it would lose its position over the build area. And because one of the things I noticed was it was when I would try and start a print, when it was all the way to the right, it would try and move farther to the right. I'd start a new print, and it would try and move farther to the right and crash detected. It thought all the way to the right was home. So instead of it 0, 0 being home, it thought XY, so X250, Y0 was home, and it couldn't go any farther to the right. All right, that's not right. What's causing it? How do I fix it? So I did, and this is after the frustration of trying to get my files off a slicer. I tried to copy the G code from a directory on my laptop onto the SD card. Every time I would do that, it would give me an error, and it's a weird error. Like I said, I've been doing computers for over 40 years. I've never seen this error. Basically, it said something to the effect of it couldn't copy all the control files. Do you want to continue? So I thought, okay, well, worst case scenario, it's on my laptop. I can plug my laptop into the printer. And, they in all of the documentation, they say you can do this. We recommend you don't. I now know why. It just wouldn't work. In fact, I don't have them. They're up there downstairs. My first couple of attempts, I got one, maybe 2 layers of this part, and all of a sudden they're coming up. They're peeling off the build surface, and the nozzle is peeling them up. And so this afternoon, I went online to the Prusa forums and I start typing in, something like X carriage all the way to the right, thinks it's home, something to that effect. And it spits out results, and then about the third one down, I click on it and I start reading, and the guy's describing exactly what's happening to me. He's everything that I've gone through, he's describing perfectly. Cool. Okay. So I'm continuing. I mean, he's got a huge long post. I mean, it's massive. He had a fix in there, and the fix was that the belt on the X-axis was too tight. Okay, I can believe that. I had my belt really tight. I'm old enough to remember working on cars and fan belts. And the thing about fan belts, especially when they got old, they would loosen up and they would slide, they would slip, and you could tell when a car needed new fan belts because you'd start it up and all of a sudden it would squeal. I mean, you could hear it coming from miles away. You could hear that squeal. You young people don't know what you're missing. Anyway, so when I put the printer together, it talks about both the X and Y axis. It talks about how tight these belts should be, and it says you should when you pinch them together, you should feel a little but not a huge amount of resistance, something like that. I mean, it was a very subjective description. So I tightened it to where I felt, because to me, a tight rubber band is, you pinch it and it's got a little resistance. So, and I know you don't want that belt to slip, so I put it in there pretty tight. Apparently, it was too tight. And one of the things I remembered from reading the manual this morning was that there was a way to tell. It would give you some numbers on the belt tension. So I picked up the manual and I started looking at the index, and of course, it doesn't say belt tension numbers in the index, but I was able to find it. It took me a few minutes of searching through the book, and it showed me that if under support, it says belt tension statistics. So I click on it, and it gives me 2 numbers, one for X, one for Y. And the book says that they should be around 275. Well, my Y-axis is at 281. This is 275 plus or minus 20. My Y-axis is at 280, 281. My X-axis is at 212. And the book says the lower the number, the tighter the belt is. Okay, I'm off by 50. It's way too tight. All right, I can believe that. So I spent, I don't know, 3 or 4 hours fiddling around with. I literally had to take the back plate off the extruder, pull the belt out and loosen it, put it back in, and I actually had to do that twice because the first time when I put it back in, it was too loose, and all I could get was when I did the pre-test calibration, all I could get was loose pulley. So eventually, with a lot of frustration and a lot of work and a lot of cussing, I will admit to that, I finally, part of the problem is that no matter what I did, I couldn't get it anywhere near 275. One of the problems was, okay, where does this number come from, and what changes it? How do I get it to refresh? Well, I found online on the Prusa website a guide to belt tensioning, something to that effect. And it says that the numbers are refreshed when it goes through that pretest. Okay, great. So the pretest, it does several things. It goes through and it checks the hot end fan, it checks the cooling fan, and then it goes through and moves the x-axis and then the y-axis and the z-axis, and it would try and do the x, and the belt would slip on the pulley, and it would say loose pulley. So I would tighten it, and then it would go back to 230. Okay. It got to the point where I had loosened up there's three screws holding that motor onto the x-axis. I left the bottom one, I loosened it just a little bit, just so I could rotate, and I loosened the two top ones so that I could rotate the motor by hand. There's a screw up at the top, which is the tensioning screw. You screw it in, and it adds tension it moves the motor, so it tensions the belt, so it's pulling it away. I had gotten to the point where I was doing half a turn either direction, loosening or tightening. If I loosened half a turn, it was a loose pulley. If I tightened half a turn, it would go through the test, and then it would come back, and I would look at the number, and it would say 230. So eventually I decided, okay, 230 is the best I'm going to get. I'm playing with the belt, the belt on the x-axis, and it is, where the y-axis, if you dropped a quarter on it, it'd bounce. This one, it would hit and just drop. It was. That's how bad it is. I say bad. That's just, that's how loose it is. But it seems to work. Okay, fine. One problem solved, or at least I think the problem is solved. So I go through it in that belt tensioning guide. It said, once you've done this, you need to go through and calibrate the XYZ axis. Okay, so I hit that test, and it goes through. And this is the test where it goes and it, with the build plate is off of the bed. You've got a piece of paper between the bed and the nozzle, and it goes through and it just kind of writes. There's no filament in the extruder. It's just moving, and it's looking for, the Pinda probe is looking for a specific point in the corner, and there's one in each corner. On the build, or on the bed, they're marked. They've got a little round circle on it. And as it's doing it, it's finding them, but last night where I was doing that test, the nozzle was well above the bed, and so it never touched the paper. Tonight, it's not tearing the paper, but it's trying to move. There's enough friction, it's trying to move the paper, and I'm concerned because I think that's just too close. It shouldn't do that. So what do? I go in, once it passes those tests, I go in and I do a z-axis calibration, which allows you, basically it prints a line along, that first line along the front edge, and then it goes and it prints a bunch of, a single line, and it just goes back and forth in a kind of a zigzag pattern. And it shows you where the z-axis is located, negative whatever. And like I said, last night when I'm watching Joe Prusa on the video, he's saying -1 millimeter or thereabouts. All right, I backed it way off to like 600. I'm sorry, -0.600 millimeters, and so -0.6 of a millimeter, and it's laying down filament, but it's not sticking to the build plate. As it goes and makes that turn, it's the filament is being pulled with it. It's like, okay, that's not enough. So I'm spinning it down. I get to 700. 700 seems to work. It's a very fine, thin thread, but it seems to stick. So I started to try a print, another batarang, and it didn't work out so well. So I took it up from 700 to 800, negative 0.800. And it printed out a batarang. It actually did print it out. I'm going to actually show you a picture here. I took a picture of 3 different batarangs at 3 different Z-axis adjustments. You never fail as long as you don't give up. Failure teaches you something, even if it teaches you what not to do. Napoleon Hill talked about if you fail enough, eventually you get to the point where there's no other option but to succeed because you've tried everything else that fails. You've tried everything that can fail, so the only thing left is to succeed. It's frustrating. It's extremely frustrating. 3D printing is really, granted, I've got what, 2 days worth of experience in this? I absolutely believe that there are people out there, I'm making this video for you if you are thinking about getting a 3D printer, if you've just bought a 3D printer and are having problems. Because all the videos I've watched, and I've been watching a whole lot of videos on YouTube about 3D printing, they all talk about how exciting it is and how wonderful it is. And yeah, absolutely. Fantastic when it works. It's getting it to the point where it works and understanding what it was that made it work. That experience that allows you allows 3D printing to be fun. I'm still in the learning curve. I'm in a massive learning curve. I have no experience whatsoever with 3D printing. When it works, I am delighted. It really is cool. When it doesn't work, it can be extremely frustrating. So my takeaway is don't give up. I know how frustrating this is. I have, like I said, my entire day was nothing but frustration. I am taking the time right now to make this video. It's later. I was hoping to have this out earlier today, but I've been busy with my printer. I know how frustrating this is for you. I absolutely understand how frustrating it is. I've been frustrated the entire day, but I do, because I have been persistent. I've kept at it, and I have paid attention. I am learning. I am discovering, and if I continue to do that, eventually I will get to the point where I have the experience to take these subjective measurements and say, oh yeah, I understand what you mean. It's going to take time. It's going to take frustration before I get there. And you're going to have the same learning curve. If you've never done this before, you're absolutely going to have the same learning curve. That's okay. Don't try to print your masterpiece right away. Don't try and print something you absolutely need to have, because it's probably not going to come out. Certainly not when you first start off. I was much too ambitious with these. Now, I'm going to try and print these again tomorrow, because I think I hope I have fixed the problem. I'm going to, like I said, I'm going to do another batarang first. It takes 20 minutes, and if changing the Z-axis the way I plan to produces this nice clean print, then I will try and print some more of these with some of the lessons I learned today, and we'll see what happens. Don't give up. As frustrating as it is, don't give up. This video is extremely long, and I'm sorry about that. I know it's been mostly a rant, but the rant has been in order for you to see where I'm at and why I'm frustrated, all of the little details of why I'm frustrated, and also why I'm not giving up. Yes, I am. I have been. I can't tell you how frustrated. I literally can't tell you on YouTube just how frustrated I've been today. But at this point, like I said, I think I know what the solutions are. I will test them tomorrow, and if they work out, I will have a video for you with hopefully with the completed versions of these, and I'll tell you what they are and why I'm doing it. And at that point, maybe my 3D printing adventure. There's a reason I call this an adventure. Adventures in 3D printing was not a fluke of a name. I knew that it was going to be an adventure. I didn't realize quite what kind of an adventure, but that's okay. Continue to print, continue to tweak. Tweaking, if you built your printer from a kit, you know far more about how that printer works than someone who bought an assembled printer from and got it started printing. If you did buy an assembled printer, don't be afraid to take it apart. It will be worth it to learn how that printer works, so that when something goes wrong, not if, when something goes wrong, you'll have an idea where the problem might be and what the solution to fixing it might also be. That is how you go from being frustrated all day to, yay, 3D printing is fantastic. I mean, even the big guys, Angus at Maker's Muse and Joel at 3D Printing Nerd, talk about how your prints don't always work. They kind of gloss over it, but they've been doing it for years. When something goes wrong, they know what caused it, and they know how to fix it, and they do it, and the next one apparently comes out perfect. Great. Someday I will have that experience. I will be able to do that. But, the whole reason for doing this channel was so that you could follow me through this adventure of learning. If I make mistakes and I tell you, here's what the fix was, here's the mistake that happened, here's why it happened, here's what I did to fix it, maybe I can keep you from making those same mistakes and being quite as frustrated as I am. Anyway, we're at 30 minutes, so far too long of a video. We'll see how much I can cut out and still make it worthwhile. Until next time, have a great day. And I truly mean that. Have a great day. I'll see you then.